It turned out that he had departed Camp 4 carrying both a backpack and an oxygen bottle. He later told me that although he didn't intend to use a gas, he wanted to have a bottle handy in the event that his power was low and he needed it higher on the peak. Upon reaching the balcony, however, he jettisoned the pack and gave his oxygen canister, mask, and regulator to Bidelman to carry for him. Because Boo Creve wasn't breathing supplemental oxygen, he had apparently decided to strip his load down to the bare minimum to gain every possible advantage in the appallingly thin air. A 20-knot breeze raked the ridge, blowing a plume of spinder far over the Kangshung face, but overhead the sky was an achingly brilliant blue. Lounging in the sun at 28,700 feet inside, my thick down suit, gazing across the roof of the world in a hypoxic stupor, I completely lost track of time. None of us paid much attention to the fact that Ong Dorj and Nawang Norbu, another Sherpa on Hall's team, were sitting beside us sharing a thermos of tea and seemed to be in no hurry to go higher. Around 11:40, Bidelman eventually asked, "Hey, Ong Dorj, are you going to fix the ropes or what?" Ong Dorj's reply was a quick, unequivocal no, perhaps because none of Fisher's Sherpas were there to share the work. Growing alarm at the crowd stacking up at the south summit, Bidelman roused Harris and Boo Creve and strongly suggested that the three guides install the ropes themselves. Hearing this, I quickly volunteered to help. Bidelman pulled a 150-foot coil of rope from his pack. I grabbed another coil from Ong Dorj, and with Boo Creve and Harris, we got underway at noon to fix lines up the summit ridge. But by then another hour had already trickled away. Bottled oxygen does not make the top of Everest feel like sea level. Climbing above the south summit with my regulator delivering just under 2 liters of oxygen per minute, I had to stop and draw 3 or 4 lungfuls of air after each ponderous step. Then I'd take one more step and have to pause for another 4 heaving breaths, and this was the fastest pace I could manage. Because the oxygen systems we were using delivered a lean mix of compressed gas and ambient air, 29,000 feet with gas felt like approximately 26,000 feet without gas. But the bottled oxygen conferred other benefits that weren't so easily quantified. Climbing along the blade of the summit ridge, sucking gas into my ragged lungs, I enjoyed a strange, unwarranted sense of calm. The world beyond the rubber mask was stupendously vivid but seemed not quite real, as if a movie were being projected in slow motion across the front of my goggles. I felt drugged, disengaged, thoroughly insulated from external stimuli. I had to remind myself over and over that there was 7,000 feet of sky on either side, that everything was at stake here, that I would pay for a single bungled step with my life. Half an hour above the south summit, I arrived at the foot of the Hillary Step, one of the most famous pitches in all of mountaineering. It's 40 feet of near vertical rock, and ice looked daunting. But, as any serious climber would, I'd wanted very badly to take the sharp end of the rope and lead the step. It was clear, however, that Boo Creve, Bidelman, and Harris all felt the same way, and it was hypoxic delusion on my part to think that any of them was going to let a client hog such a coveted lead. In the end, Boo Creve, as senior guide, and the only one of us who had climbed Everest previously, claimed the honor. With Bidelman paying out the rope, he did a masterful job of leading the pitch. But it was a slow process, and as he painstakingly ascended toward the crest of the step, I nervously studied my watch and wondered whether I might run out of oxygen. My first canister had expired at 7 a.m. on the balcony, after lasting about 7 hours. Using this as a benchmark, at the south summit I calculated that my second canister would expire around 2 p.m., which I'd stupidly assumed would allow plenty of time to reach the summit and return to the south summit to retrieve my third oxygen bottle. But now it was already after 1 p.m., and I was beginning to have serious doubts. At the top of the step, I shared my concern with Bidelman and asked whether he minded if I hurried ahead to the summit instead of pausing to help him string the last coil of rope along the ridge. "Go for it," he graciously offered. "I'll take care of the rope." Plodding slowly up the last few steps to the summit, I had the sensation of being underwater, of life moving at quarter speed. And then I found myself atop a slender wedge of ice, adorned with a discarded oxygen cylinder and a battered aluminum survey pole, with nowhere higher to climb. A string of Buddhist prayer flags snapped furiously in the wind. Far below, Down a side of the mountain I had never laid eyes on, the dry Tibetan Plateau stretched the horizon as a boundless expanse of dun-colored earth. Reaching the top of Everest is supposed to trigger a surge of intense elation. Against long odds, after all, I had just attained a goal I'd coveted since childhood. But the summit was really only the halfway point. Any impulse I might have felt towards self-congratulation was extinguished by overwhelming apprehension about the long, dangerous descent that lay ahead.